Hello and welcome to the Algebra Readiness presentation. This video will explain the requirements needed for 7th grade students to be recommended for algebra in 8th grade. In addition, we will share what Algebra Readiness looks like to help you and your student make the best choice about whether or not they are ready to take on this unique challenge. So are you ready for the presentation? Let's get started. We felt strongly about beginning our presentation with our philosophy. We believe that every single student is capable of learning math. This presentation isn't about whether your student is capable to take on an algebra class in the 8th grade, but instead focuses on if he or she is ready. Our 8th grade does offer 2 math courses, the pre-algebra course and the Algebra 1 honors course. Even though this is about algebra readiness, we felt it was important to discuss the pre-algebra course. The pre-algebra course is the first half of Algebra 1. It has plenty of opportunity to enrich higher level students who may not be ready for the rigor of the algebra class. Students that are on the fence and decide for themselves to take pre-algebra do wind up with a really strong foundation to do algebra the right way and are prepared their freshman year for algebra. However, incoming 8th grade students who are ready for the rigor of a high school level course may be ready for the Algebra Honors course. Either way, we want all of our students to become successful individuals, and we want our students to choose the correct path that will help them to become those successful mathematical learners. Now, there are requirements that students must meet in order to even be considered to be recommended for the algebra course in 8th grade. To begin, we are looking for students to have gotten a minimum of a level 4 on SBAC. This comes from the 6th grade SBAC, as we will not have received their 7th grade scores prior to making recommendations. We also started using a new data collection tool, which is called the MAP test. The MAP is an assessment that measures what students know and what they're ready to learn next. Students do take the MAP test 3 times throughout the year, once in the fall, once in the winter, and once in the spring. What we decided to do was to look at data from the current 8th grade algebra students, what they got on what the average score was in the fall. And based on that, we decided that a MAP RIT score of a 235 or higher from the spring assessment in their 7th grade year is an expectation to be recommended for the algebra course. Current students have received their scores from the fall and winter MAPS test. And if they haven't done so already, they will be setting goals for their spring assessment. In addition, again, if they haven't already, they will take the spring assessment in March, and they will be told their scores once they become available. We encourage you to discuss this assessment and the scores with your children. We're going to skip over to the Iowa score very quickly. The Iowa test is another assessment that we do look at. It is an aptitude test that students take in April of their 7th grade year, and we seek those who receive an Iowa score of the 7th canine or higher. Finally, we look for students who have a quiz and a test average of a B+ their 7th grade year. One thing that's really important to understand is that there's no preparation that can be done for all of the assessments that are used, with the exception for the quizzes and tests that your child takes in 7th grade math. The final and probably the most important piece of being recommended for the 8th grade algebra class is that teacher recommendation. Students' current 7th grade math teachers do make these recommendations, and what they look for is a student's interest in the subject, their work ethic, their attendance, and their homework quality and completion. Now, a student who has met and or exceeded all of these requirements is a student that will be recommended for the Algebra 1 honors class. Now that we've gone over the requirements to be recommended, we want to focus our attention on what happens once a student is placed in the algebra class their 8th grade year. One thing that we think is really important to start with is that the final algebra grade that students get their 8th grade year will go on their high school transcript. It will not state that students took the Algebra 1 course their 8th grade year. We do have conversations in the classroom about what transcripts are and what they are used for, but it is also important for parents to be discussing this as well with their child. Again, this is the final yearly grade that students receive in that Algebra 1 course that goes on their high school transcript. The next thing that we really thought strongly about was the content that is delivered in the classroom through the first marking period. The first marking period covers mainly review content from 7th grade math. We believe that students who receive an 80% test or quiz average by the end of the first quarter are ready to move on to the more challenging curriculum throughout the remaining of the year. It is our experience that students who have not been able to maintain a B- or higher test or quiz average in that first marking period do struggle as the content gets a little bit more difficult. Therefore, students must maintain that 80% test or quiz average by the end of the first marking period. Otherwise, they will be moved into the pre-algebra course so that they could develop a stronger foundation to be prepared for that algebra class their freshman year of high school. One thing that we want to note about this is we truly want students to feel ready and prepared to move on to the more challenging math classes that they will be faced with in high school. If we feel that it is a little difficult for them at the beginning of the year and they're not able to maintain these assessment scores, they will struggle throughout the year, and we don't want to see them being turned off by the subject. And we also don't want them to feel like they're not capable of doing math well, because that typically isn't the case. One thing that we do want you to understand is that there is more than just the academic component to this class. There is also the emotional component. We need to understand that not only is the content becoming more difficult, but students are also adjusting to a much faster moving class with more workload. Remember, they're completely skipping over the pre-algebra course. Therefore, throughout the algebra course, we not only cover the algebra curriculum, but we also have to introduce and teach them the topics that they would have learned in the pre-algebra class. So it is important, again, to understand that this class is more about the academic component. There's a lot more to it, and students need to be ready to accept that challenge. They need to be ready to turn into those learners that can balance academics as well as, again, the pacing and the workload of the course. Now, students who are moving through the algebra course in the first marking period might start to feel a bit challenged, might start to feel a bit overwhelmed, might start to feel a bit stressed out, and they might start to feel like maybe they don't want to continue on in that class their 8th grade year, but again, build that strong foundation. If that's the case, we do allow students to move into the pre-algebra class as early as necessary within the first marking period. It is definitely a discussion that we are willing to have with students. But again, it is so important to understand that we do not want students to stress out in this class. We want to help them, we want to guide them, we want to support them, but we also want them to feel comfortable, confident, and ready to continue on with the challenges and the rigor that this class has to offer. After the first quarter, no withdrawal is allowed from the algebra course. So what this means is by the time the first marking period ends, students who are in algebra will remain in algebra for the rest of the school year, and students who are in pre-algebra will remain in pre-algebra for the rest of the school year. Now I know we're getting a little bit ahead, but we felt that it was necessary to also share the high school information with you. In February, we begin to think about our recommendations for students as far as their 9th grade years go. And there are, again, requirements that must be met for students to be recommended for specific courses their freshman year of high school. Students that are placed in the honors algebra course as 8th graders will be recommended for geometry if they have a C- average or higher for the year and a teacher recommendation. And students who have a B+ average for the year and a teacher recommendation will be moved on to the honors geometry class their freshman year of high school. Sticking with the high school information for just a little bit longer, we felt that it was necessary to share the high school trajectory because there is some important information that you should note about pre-algebra versus algebra course as 8th graders. What you're looking at now is different tracks that our 8th graders may follow in high school. In 8th grade, students will either take pre-algebra or Algebra 1 honors. Students who take pre-algebra, their 8th grade, will move on to Algebra 1 their freshman year. And then students have the option to double up their sophomore year, which means that students can take Algebra 2 and geometry their sophomore year of high school and get on that AP calculus track. So going a little further with that, students who are not in the Algebra 1 honors class will have the opportunity to get on the same track as their peers who took the Algebra 1 honors class their 8th grade year. So there is that possibility. So students, again, who want to take those higher level math classes their junior or senior year of high school, but aren't quite ready for the algebra class their 8th grade year, still have the opportunity to take those higher level courses if they choose to double up. That is something that we feel is really important to understand because, again, there are students who academically are ready for algebra, but those other components is something that they need time to adjust to and to learn and adapt to before moving on. One more thing to note about the high school level, there is an option to take other mathematical electives as juniors and seniors along the way. This is something that students will learn more about when the high school guidance counselors come to talk to them in February of their 8th grade year. We really want to discuss the importance of students being independent learners. In general, when students get to 8th grade, no matter what classes they take, it is our role as teachers to help them become independent learners so that they are prepared and ready for high school. However, students who are recommended and who are taking the honors leveled algebra course as 8th graders are expected to already be independent learners. What that means is that Students are expected to spend some of their own time learning concepts in order to help them truly understand skills before we move on to another skill. So as an example, if we're working on solving equations that include fractions, if your student is struggling with fraction operations, we don't necessarily have the time to spend class reteaching how to do those fraction operations. We can help them during other times, such as enrichment, but we really expect our algebra students to spend time reviewing and learning those fraction operations so that they can come to the algebra class and apply that understanding to those more difficult problems, such as solving equations with fractions in them. So what I'm saying is that students, if they feel that they're struggling with certain concepts, we expect them to be independent learners and to seek opportunities to make their understanding better so that they can make connections and master new skills that we do go over in the classroom. We also expect students to be more resourceful and come to class with most of their questions already answered. Now, one thing that is important to note here is students will oftentimes, if they get to a question on their homework and they feel it is too difficult for them, they might leave it blank. This is something that we don't want to see our algebra students doing. This is something we really don't want any of our 8th grade students to be doing. What we would expect for our students to do in that case is to exhaust all of their resources possible to try and help them understand the content. So they have rewatched videos, they have gone back in the book, they have reached out to friends or people that they know can help them. They have used enrichment periods or other times to come in and ask for extra help. But no matter what, they've tried it. They've showed us that they've put in the effort and they've given it their all and they've really tried to understand what it is that they're learning, even if they still don't understand it fully. They come to class, they showed us what they show us what they've done, and at that point they ask questions. This is where I got stuck. Can you help me out with this? Or I was really struggling with this. I think I figured it out, but can you check and help me to understand it better? Or can you check to make sure that I am getting this? So we really expect students to be more resourceful, to not leave their questions blank because they're struggling or because they're stuck, but instead to put in the effort and really give it their all and really try it even if they feel they are on the wrong track. Finally, it's very important for students to keep track of their grades long before they find out what they've gotten on the report cards. This is especially important because, again, their final scores do go on their high school transcripts. We do offer opportunities for extra credit, mainly on assessments. But when students come up to us and ask for extra credit opportunities to help boost a grade because of a low test or quiz score or because maybe homework hasn't been done, we don't typically provide that kind of extra credit. And on the next slide, we're going to go over what it means to go above and beyond. And if students do what they need to do in that class, they should have no problem earning the grade that they want to earn in that class, which means they wouldn't need to worry about seeking out extra credit opportunities. We really also felt it was important to discuss what it means to go above and beyond in the Algebra 1 Honors course. And what you're going to find is that some of the things that I'm going to talk about on this slide will be overlapping. The first thing that you see here is correct homework mistakes daily. And this can go in two directions. First of all, when students are working on their homework, we truly feel that students should be checking their answers before coming into class the next day. In addition to checking answers, they should be trying to redo and fix the problems that they got wrong. Now, you might be thinking, well, what's the purpose of that? It's homework. They're going to come into class the next day. You're going to go over it. And that's all true, but homework is only effective if students do it with purpose. And if students are only going to do the homework to get the grade, that's not doing the homework with purpose. Doing the homework with purpose means that they are doing the homework to practice the skills so that they can get better at understanding what it is that we're doing in the classroom. And if they are going back, fixing mistakes, understanding where they're making those errors, they are improving their understanding, and that is what we want. This also goes along with correcting quiz and test errors, which we'll get to in a second. The other piece of correcting homework and mistakes daily is even going back and fixing the incorrect problems after we've gone over it in class. So if you come to class, you get a question or two wrong, you're still going back to that assignment and trying to figure out where your error was, even if we've already moved on to the next topic. Students who are constantly looking at their errors, fixing them, they're building up their understanding, which is going to help them to improve as we move through the curriculum. And again, this does go into correcting quiz and test errors, even if you're not doing it for extra points. Students should constantly be looking at all of their assessments. Whether they get an A or whether they get a C, they should be focusing on the questions that they got incorrect and trying to find where their errors are. In addition, students should be using the feedback that is written on their assessments and trying to build their understanding based on what it is that they may have gotten wrong. So again, continuously going over, evaluating their work, and fixing mistakes is going to help to build that understanding. Doing extra practice problems is something else that we feel is necessary for students to go above and beyond in the honors algebra class. I often speak to something that students are interested in when I talk about the relevance of doing extra practice. So for a second, think about something that you enjoy doing. It could be baking, it could be cooking, it could be crafting, it could be chess, it could be athletics, it could be music, it doesn't matter. Think about something. Now, how do you improve? You improve by practicing. Every time you go to practice, every time you continue to practice that skill, every time you sit down and you learn something new about it, every time you're doing that, you are improving your skill. You are improving your understanding. And the same goes for math class. The more students are practicing, the better they're going to get, the better they're going to understand. Redoing problems goes back to kind of correcting homework mistakes and quiz and test errors. And then finally, I want to talk about studying. Students should be studying often in class, whether they are in an honors level class or not, whether it is in math or not, students should be studying. Now, higher level math students may not have had to employ these strategies in previous years, and it may be a learning curve to go above and beyond math because math probably has been something that has always come easy to them. Students may never had to have studied for a math test before, and this is the year they might start to see that it is important to start studying. Oftentimes, students think, how do you study for math? It's math. You're just doing problems. There is a way to study for math, and students should be studying for math. And I'm going to briefly discuss how to effectively study for math, and this also connects to how students effectively do homework. First and foremost, no matter what content area, students should always be studying with a pen or pencil in hand. If they are not writing when studying, then their studying is not effective. So it is really important that students are constantly writing when they are studying. Now, to speak specifically to math, I'm going to kind of break it down by starting with homework. Whenever students are doing homework or studying, they should have their notes out for whatever topic or topics they are working on. Even if they are 100% confident in themselves and in their ability to do those problems, they should still have their notes out so that they can refer to those notes and just double check that they are understanding the content. When students have their notes out, they should then think about, if they're studying, what their most challenging topic is, all the way down to what their easiest topic is. Students work best if they start studying with their most challenging topic. This way, if they get burnt out, if they get exhausted, if they don't have time to study those easier things that have come easier to them, it's okay because they know that they are understanding that. When they are studying, they should be practicing problems. They can practice extra problems from the textbook. They can use problems that were in previous homework or class examples. They can go and do a Google search of, let's say we're working on solving equations. They could type in solving equations worksheet, and there are a million resources that pop up, and most of them do have answers to them. So they should be practicing the problems, practicing reviewing the notes, making sure that they're doing that correctly, and then finally correcting their mistakes, checking their answers and going back and fixing those mistakes. That is the most important piece to all of this. If students aren't checking answers and going back and fixing mistakes, they're never going to know if they truly have mastered the concept before they take the assessment. If students are doing their homework that way, using their notes, checking answers, fixing mistakes, then there really is no stress to taking an assessment because they will be ready and prepared for any assessment that they're taking. So it's really important to employ these strategies and to continuously be working on them throughout the school year. Just to give you one final look at the timeline, because you might be thinking, well, when will my student know whether or not they are recommended? We have provided this very brief timeline for you. In March, this month, we had the Algebra Readiness Parent Night, and this presentation goes along with what we discussed at the Informational Night. Mid to late March, students take their MAP assessment. So remember, this is one of those assessments that students have to receive a score of 235 or higher on to be considered to be recommended. In April, students will take the Iowa assessment. Again, the MAP and the Iowa assessment are not tests that can be studied for, but students should do their absolute best on those assessments. And finally, in June, prior to school ending, 7th grade math teachers will have a discussion with their students to let them know what their recommendation status is as far as being recommended for the Algebra 1 honors class as 8th graders. We appreciate you taking the time and in listening to this presentation, and we hope that you gained a lot of information about the requirements to be recommended and what happens once a student is placed in that algebra course. Should you have any other questions, please feel free to contact us. If you have questions about placement, it is best to contact one of the 7th grade math teachers. And if you have questions about the algebra course itself, it would be best to contact one of the 8th grade math teachers. Again, we truly appreciate you taking the time to listen to this video, and we hope to see you and your student at our informational night and open house in September.